Damn right, damn right. I'm here with a citizen numero uno, citizen J, I guess as you call him. He dragged me in from the sun to feed me vitamin J, and that's what I'm going to be getting out a good man here called Laszlo today, and we're going to talk about many things, such as what happens when you go into the unconscious expecting to find Richard Dawkins, but instead what you get is Jesus Christ coming blaring his stuff in. You expect Attila the Hun, but instead you get Jesus Christ coming in, being like, "Have you taken your juice, your designated juice syringes, I guess, today?" I don't even know where I'm going with this.
Or maybe like a unique amalgamation of Attila the Hun and Jesus Christ. And also, I have to say, I'm quite honored to be called Citizen J. I'm not sure if I can actually live up to that, you know?
It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, I guess like that's the goal. That's the archetype, isn't it? This is the archetype we're trying to lead everyone towards, is the unification of the opposites, the unification of Attila and Juicy J, and that'll be it. So I guess you're the Bastion, you're the Saint Peter carrying forward this message, being like,
or the Saint Laszlo, you know?
Or the Saint Laszlo. Boyos, imagine Jesus but with a sword on a horse. Coming from the sky, all dressed in gold. Yeah, I can get on board with that.
Wow, well, Jesus coming from the sky with a sword on a horse. Well, I might have read it somewhere else as well.
Yeah, true.
I actually wanted to talk to you about that specifically, but probably we will get there, you know, because I just thought about Revelations, and it's very like odd role that it played in my conversion. I guess we can call it my conversion, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, no worries. Well, look, you know, a lot of people are obviously listening to my channel, and I'm very, very torn between the glory of Jesus and the immense seductive power of Apollo and the Greek myths and all that stuff and whatnot. And I guess you call it the European mythology beforehand. And that's kind of pulling me apart. I guess you could say Nietzsche versus Christ, or maybe Lucifer versus Christ, or something like that. And I don't want to suggest anything, but I'm trying to explore that. And that's me personally, like going through something, you know, that's me, like I'm sort of putting out the symbols from my unconscious and all this stuff. And someone who's been with me since the start, like since I was like on, 100 subscribers, Laszlo popped up, and he was following me and Jimmy when we were doing Ion, and he's a good friend of both of us as well. And me and him have been talking the last while, and it's been so interesting for me to just listen to him and his relationship with, like, sort of what his unconscious brought out during this period or whatever, or how these symbols started to heal him, because it's immensely relatable, you know. Like he's a good dude. He kind of brought me down to earth in many senses, and he's got like many great stories and frames that I've got to bring up. But this is going to be an extremely juicy Christ pill story about Laz going through all his stuff. So I guess we may as well like launch into it from the start. Like, you were following myself and Jimmy's stuff, but you were, top of the world, lovely corporate job. Like, this is the thing. I think it's so hard to get across to people, like that I witnessed, that was so amazing, is that you were on top of the world, killer job in London, like absolutely slaying. And then this happens, and you start to take a step back from that. You have it all, and you start to say, no, I need to be more responsible. No, I can't get away with everything. No, I need to pull away from that. And I remember when you were telling me this, I was like, I don't know, dude, like, you're doing all right. I don't think you need to worry too much. And now, pretty much, like, if you were stuck in London still, it would have been like hell. But you actually like snuck out the back door somehow, almost as if you were guided or blessed. I don't know. But I guess tell us about where you were.
You said it. Well, first of all, I just have to say that Jesus loves you for your bold exploration into the world of ideas. So I'm praying for you. You're in good hands.
I do. Like, to be honest, like to be a bit real, like I do feel sometimes like some immensely good energy, because it's like I feel horrible. I would never like condemn Christians, because I've noticed that they would write to me stuff like, I'm praying for you and all that stuff. And that's so moving, because it's actually just immense goodwill out of nowhere. And it is like incredibly powerful. It does make me kind of stop and think every now and again.
That's how it's intended. So
yeah, it's good. It's good. And it feels very unintentional, that you're not being like, I'm trying to convert you or anything like that. They're just sort of saying, I'm sending you good juice. And I'm like, I love good juice. Yes.
Who doesn't? But yeah, it's been a crazy story. And it It did kind of start with the Boyo pill, but we can go back just a little bit, to the time of Jordan Peterson when I encountered him. I'm not gonna get into all those details, what we already spoke about, but that was the thing that opened the door for me to be able to engage with Christianity in a new way, because before I really thought that it was kind of a philosophy of weakness to begin with, and also just these made up superstitious moral principles guidelines, and I wasn't willing to align myself with any kind of moral compass anyways. So there was like a lot of resistance coming from me, and I grew up without a religious education, even though I grew up in a relatively religious country, Hungary, where even after 5 decades of Soviet occupation, you can get rid of Jesus there. I don't know if you know, even today, culturally, you can see that even those who are kind of against this Christian rebranding of the government, people there are very, very much rooted in Christian values. Of course, I didn't realize that, but as I moved on in life, and I was in the army, then I moved here to London to really pursue this cosmopolitan dream of working in the corporate world, and I got a really good job at a startup in London. We were working next to the Shard for like 5 years, and it was a nice progression, I mean, for me, coming from Hungary and being just broke. I mean, in the army, in the Hungarian army, you're not making a killing, at least no, with regards to your bank account. Yeah.
A killing? Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a part of yourself you haven't told me about, but go on.
Yeah. I mean, we can also talk about like why I joined the army. I mean, I had all kinds of weird intentions, but when I moved into the corporate world, then I quickly climbed a ladder. I mean, you can say a lot of things about capitalism, but back in the day, like, we're talking about 2015, if you really set your mind to do something and you put in the hard work, it was rewarded. Okay. So, that was really good. I quickly reached, I think, like the top 1% here in the UK in terms of income. So like that was like a world of opportunities that opened up for me. And without a moral compass, I could do whatever I wanted. And I actually really enjoy that too for a while, but then things started to kind of come apart. I started to see the cracks in the system. And that's when Jordan Peterson just entered the scene. And with him reframing Christianity in terms of, hey, look, guys, there's actually some wisdom here, at least cultural wisdom. But when I saw that in contrast with where the West is today, because for a Hungarian dude to move to a cosmopolitan city like London in 2015, and these were quite an intense couple of years here. Okay, you can even ask people who live here that things are different. Things are happening that are shocking just to the average person. It was shocking to me as well, and I started to like reconsider things. And Jordan Peterson reframed Christianity. I started to interact with that whole world in a different way. I started to adapt things like, for example, telling the truth, or at least not lying, which is a very fundamental thing. I use lying as a tool throughout my life. I just used it to manipulate reality, to get out of obligations in school, and even in the army. And I thought it was working for me. It worked for me. On the surface, I got the results that I wanted. But then Jordan Peterson made that compelling case that maybe you shouldn't lie because it's a bad strategy, because you are creating chaos around yourself. And I was reconsidering that wow, something that has a moral charge, like a moral connotation, can actually be useful. And I adopted that, and I just saw the positive effects, And this is when I opened up to Christ as well. Because in the past, I saw him as this weakling, as this hippie. And I found out that it was exactly the opposite. Like, he stands for telling the truth no matter what, in the face of evil, and being convicted unjustly and still standing up for your principles. And this is just a compelling image for a young guy, especially in a world like today where you can't really find this. I don't even know if I told you this, but even in my company, we had a bunch of like high-level consultants coming to help us out, like accomplished people spending 10, 15, 20 years in the highest levels. You know, we're talking about like big corporate IBM, Intel, big corporations, VP level, you know, and these people need to be skilled and they need to know their stuff. But I never really looked up to them, you know, I just didn't. It's not something that you can control. And it was because, now I know in retrospect, it was because of their lack of moral consistency, because they didn't really have a spine, you know. So people were really looking for that. Yeah, that's why.
Interesting.
Yeah. And now that I had Christ kind of reframed, I started to like move closer and closer to him, but still really engaging in an intellectual way.
Yeah.
And that's when the Boyo happened, you know. I just wanted to give a little bit of background of
well, that's brilliant, because like that's so relatable. Like, first of all, it's now like I've said this plenty of times now at this point, but now that it's trendy to not like Jordan Peterson, kind of we're coming out as the dissidents of it and sort of being like, he has some good stuff to say. And I listened to a couple of his things there a while ago, and like maybe some things you can dismiss, but when he talks about responsibility, like you're just like, wow, this guy is fucking on point. And the more I thought about it, because you were really one of the main people who really like humbled me about being careful about going too Nietzsche and anti-Christian and all this stuff, because the way you talk about it was so much different than most people. Most people would try intellectually convince me, but you would always just talk about your experience with it, like how it hit you on your soul and all that. And so, for example, you describe him running around the corporate world, and you're noticing these people don't have I'm sure it's not like as blunt as this, but they wouldn't be like, you know, paragons of courage and virtue or something like that. And you would expect these people at the top of the hierarchy to be the best characters you could possibly be. We sort of have that assumption, but they don't. And I remember you saying this to me before, this was just such a mind-blowing reframe, is that Jesus is about the guy who is virtuous, and that's it. It's not about him being like this fucking world conquering hero or anything like that. It's just he does the right thing, and that's what makes him conquer the world in a very, very special way. And that really, like, I was like, oh fuck, that's such a good way of looking at it. And then well, maybe we'll get into that more a little bit later, but how you like connect with it emotionally as opposed to intellectually, because I can obviously understand that, but to actually feel that is something interesting, because if I put my mind away, like I definitely connect with that vibe and whatnot. So it's awesome. But I guess the one place I wanted to lead this a bit, I want you to talk a little bit about your struggles with your family and all that at home. I don't know, do you want to talk about that? But that'd be something cool to dive into. But maybe before we get into that, tell us just how you went from intellectual Jordan Peterson Jesus to full-on Christ-filled Laszlo Crusader. Like, how did that happen?
That's a great question. I'm just thinking about a few concepts that didn't really come together up until like right now in this moment. And that's the idea of the bridge, you know, because I see now like a series of bridges. So even Jordan Peterson was a bridge, you know, from that very hardcore intellectual world, because as I told you, and you know very well, I was a Sam Harris fan. I was listening to all of his podcasts. I was binging Richard Dawkins videos for weekends. And I really enjoy that. I was, you know, basking in that intellectual pride that I'm above these superstitious idiots. And Jordan Peterson was the bridge, because literally he got interviewed by Sam Harris, which made me listen. You know, so that was a bridge there. Then Peterson was the bridge between, let's say, the intellectual Christianity and then the deeper, more, I don't know, like spiritual, emotional, esoteric even, you can call it, which was the Boyo thing. And even Christ himself, if you think about him, he is a bridge. He is a bridge between humanity and divinity, between God and humanity. He serves that. That's why he is both human and God, as the story goes. And even if you think about him being a king, and we will talk about kings probably later on in the conversation as well, the king, it is the pontifex, which translates to bridge. That's the actual role in its core, you know?
Didn't know that.
Yeah. So my conversion, I think the intellectual stuff was necessary to bring down my guard, because I was really intellectually entrenched, I think, in this materialistic worldview. So I needed to be massaged a little bit. But then my actual conversion, that happened on a different dimension. And that was actually a surprise to me. And I guess that's how conversions go.
Yeah,
It is kind of a shock and a surprise, because you have an encounter, and then people would say, like, what kind of encounter? And it's, getting into woo-woo territory. Well, I don't know what it actually is, and I'm sure that it can be measured in all kinds of ways with regards to brain activity and chemicals, but it doesn't explain the actual experience, which becomes real in terms of you as a person, or as a soul, or as a perspective, or maybe the same thing. Jung said also that it's a point of view, your soul, basically. And something else. It's an encounter, and it leaves a mark, and you can explain it away, but then it's just a choice of something supernatural happened, and I'm choosing to ignore it, and that's fine. You can always choose that. People choose that all the time. But you are presented with a choice. That's what it is. That's what an encounter is. And how that happened was through Ion, because I love Carl Jung in general. You guys really took a dive into that crazy psychedelic trip of a book, and it was a really good story. Both the book itself, I think it's a fantastic story. It's Carl Jung's personal myth, rooted in science and psychology, but ultimately I look at it as a fantastic fantasy novel. Yeah. Again, rooted in reality. And also the Boyo story, which is a drama on its own, which is really engaging. And because I think I had the permission now through Jung to engage with this and still kind of preserve my intellectual integrity. We're just talking about psychology.
Yes.
Like a renowned psychologist. I'm safe, I'm safe while I'm tripping. Because that's what happens. He started to talk about Christ in an entirely new way. So even Peterson didn't really go there. Where Jung went with Christ was such a comprehensive, novel way of interacting with that archetype first, because that was the thing. When the idea of the collective unconscious really revealed itself in front of me, and I understood that it exists, because that's what it is. It's more than a theory. When you understand these concepts, which are jargon, the collective unconscious, but when you get it, it's real, and that you have encounters with it all the time, and in that you have something which is eternal, like an archetype, this ancient image of Jesus Christ, and things started to kind of come together. And that was it. Basically, the encounter happened out of the blue. I couldn't even pinpoint one moment, but it was a really intense period in general. I think for all of us.
Yeah, that's actually what I want to get into is how that kind of came to you in terms of visions and whatnot. But I guess just to describe to people the way I process a lot of what you're saying, and the way I saw it actually as it was happening to you, because you started coming up with some interesting frames. And for example, you talk about the collective unconscious, and this is an interesting idea, because we've talked about this before. For example, when we talk, if I curse, I'll be like, oh, Jesus Christ, what did I just do? And there's little subtle things like that you notice, or you're like, holy Lord, I'm fucking tired today. Fuck. Good God. Or even during the peak of, shall we say, sexual orgasm, what do you say? You say, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, these type of things. And this is a very, very European thing, It's it's all across that type of thing. And Jung was always saying you can't run off to the East and do yoga and fix yourself and all that. You have to kind of find this stuff back. And then I'm reading the Red Book now, and he basically says you can't skip the mystery of Christ. And I realized that that's true. You can't just dilly-dally over it. You must deeply contemplate it. Maybe it's not what you quite think it's going to be towards the end, but you must face it, most certainly. And then the thing that was so interesting the way you presented it is that the idea that we talk about the logos and all that, we talk about the shape of the universe, and I always bang on about the fact that music has order in it and all that. And the thing is that if I say to you, I'm like, Laszlo, music has order in it, you're like, oh, that's great, intellectually understand that, but when I'm faced with a gun on my head, I won't be like, the logos of music. You won't say that. When someone, if the Soviets came in and put a gun to your head, you would be like, oh, Jesus Christ, help me. And it made me understand what you're trying to say with that is that it's very, very difficult to trust your intellect to conceptualize all this stuff. I'm always talking about the idea that you must make abstractions felt, You know, you must make your big ideas felt. You must make the abstractions felt. And so the logos of music is an abstraction, and it's weak for people a lot. I find solace in it, but when you say that Jesus Christ, the being, literally was the personification of that, and you're able to emotionally invest in this, that is when you start to see the power of it, because that means that you can put your faith, trust, and hope and love, and understand that it cares about you. It cares about you. That's an amazing thought. And it's alive and it cares about you. And then that type of idea makes me understand why people emotionally would call out to Christ in those moments. Because I've done it. As much as I larp about talking about Apollo, when things get serious, I found myself praying. I found myself saying, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." And I do. I found that happening. And I'm very careful not to betray that, because like you're saying, it's not something I can just dismiss. Like, my intellect spirals off in these directions, but I'm not allowed to just skip over that because, Nietzsche or something like that. I have to be careful with that. And then that's how I process what you're saying there, is that like, this is something that's in me that's almost like sub-rational, maybe deeper and more profound than reason, that my reason must humble itself too. So it's very, very interesting you bring it up like that.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into that more, or shall we rip into...
Yeah. Well, I just have a few thoughts. Interestingly enough, and I just remember it. You had a video about the Bible, and it had a narrative. It was a simple video. You were just talking, a few images got in the background with some music. I think that was it. And you were just telling a story, and I was I was in an emotionally receptive state when I saw that video, and it was just about the story of, and God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son. It was, you reframed it. You took that passage from the Bible. I think it was brilliant. Probably my favorite video from you of all time. And it was about, okay, humanity. Here's humanity. We are in this destitute place. There's death. There's darkness.
Yes.
In human history, there's war. There is pain and anguish. And we put our trust, since the beginning of humanity, we put our trust in the gods or a god. We looked up and was searching for answers. And you framed it like, our question is that, look, God, if you're up there, like, how can we know? How can we be sure that all this suffering is not for nothing? That you posed that question. And it was fantastic because you continued on with, what is God's answer? Like, what can he do? Like, will he talk to you? Will he like appear in front of you? No, he sends his only begotten son, knowing that we will fucking eat him alive.
Yeah.
All he will do from the beginning is just declare that, guys, love each other. Like, I love you. That's my message. And he knows that he will be torn to pieces. He will be flayed alive and then nailed to a cross and humiliated, and really taking a dive into the darkest, most evil aspects of human existence. And now we're talking about the incarnation, because I think it's really pivotal to the line of thought that you just proposed with, in terms of intellectual, not just intellectual, but emotional engagement with Christ. Because I think actually that's where the answer is. I mean, I've been dabbling around in different religions since my teens. I was really actually into the Viking stuff. We don't talk much about that, dude, but I was learning runes and stuff, like, yeah. like that deep. And then when I moved to London, I was going hard at Buddhism, I still have a meditation practice, and that was a time when I was doing like 2 hours of yoga every day, and I was actually interested in the philosophy, and I think there's a lot of value there. But what's missing is a personal relationship with a redeemer, with that person. And as you said, that's needed, because without that, your investment and your engagement is not complete. Like, how would it be? Because there's this whole chunk of emotional investment missing. Because as we talked about it, you can revere the truth, or you can respect the truth. You can be in awe of the truth, but you can't really like love the truth. Or you can, and through Jesus Christ, because there is this person who became one with you, who incarnated, who is divinity, the seed of divinity, actually manifesting in the flesh. And it was also, by the way, with this incarnation, Carl Jung had a line that really stuck with me. And I think he said something like, when the archetype manifests itself in the flesh, strange things happen. And it just rang true. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. And then I was like, okay, weird. Because before I was like, okay, Christ, like a person, maybe like a wise teacher, maybe Christ as an archetype. I can see the hero. With that, by the way, the whole idea of him coming back, like his second coming, I didn't even know anything about probably the Sermon on the Mount and that kind of stuff. But for some reason, when this idea was presented to me, that by the way, he's coming back as the judge on the horse, in like bloody garments, with an army of angels, with a sword in his mouth, I was like, okay, yeah, like that makes perfect sense, you know? And that was actually one of the anchors, because that just felt right. I was like, yes, I want to know more. Like, tell me, what about the sermons?
The Hungarian instincts that just kick in. You're like, horse army? I am down. Like, I am down.
Count me in. Yeah. So now, actually, without me being to properly explain, you can now maybe get a little bit of the energy of the emotional engagement, because also what happened during that time is, and maybe this is where we can get into the family stuff, and I hope it will actually help a lot of people, because it definitely helped me. That suddenly, the weird thing about Jesus is, when you take a leap of faith, so you actually say that, cool, now things were revealed to me that weren't before, and I'm going to put my trust in this, or I'm going to put my trust in him. You know, it's becoming personal. It's becoming more intimate. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea of the Christian religion, as far as I understand, and I'm no expert by it, any means, any stretch of the imagination, but it is about an intimate relationship. That's at the heart of it. In Buddhism, it's maybe about your like really divorced and detached understanding of your own mind, so you can make a decision about not giving into temptations or whatever, but there's no personal relationship at the heart of it. In Christianity, that's what it's all about. I think that's why Christ is in the middle of it.
That's what I really noticed, like from an outsider perspective. I really noticed about you that was so interesting, is that like the way your behavior changed. So when you first came in, like you obviously had those noble instincts where you're just like expecting high standards and all this, and coming in and you're like, all right, I want the absolute best juice. And like when Boyos would be around, you'd sort of like, not in a kind of cruel way, but just in a very, very Chad way. You'd just be sort of like, look, like we got to get the best out of ourselves and all this stuff. And obviously you were like winning on all fronts, as you said, you were like killing it in London. But then you started coming in with this idea of faith. And that was like so foreign to me. I'm sort of like, I'm leading with my reason. I need to understand, I need to break everything down. I need to, rip all this stuff apart and intellectually chew this up and process it in my head and whatnot. Now, that's really important to me still, but then you're coming in and you're saying, no, this has moved me. And I think I should trust this. And it's an interesting idea. I'm like, what the fuck is this guy on about? So you're saying like, I've got to trust that if I behave the right way. No, it's not even like that. It's almost like I got to imagine that I'm in a team and the captain is Jesus, and I just want to I just want to play well on his team. Not necessarily like, it's not more complicated than that. Just think of that dynamic. I just want to play well in his team, and I know what he wants, and he's a good guy, and I want to impress him, and he cares about me. He wants me to do well, and we're in this together type of thing. And so then your behavior started to change a lot. And you were like, as I said, you would sort of go against, you're saying, all right, I don't know about this corporate hellhole and all this stuff. I don't know, is that the way forward? And I'm like, dude, money, like you're killing it with money. Like, well, I don't know where you're going to go. What are you doing? Like, you're at the peak of like the best time in history to be making money in one of the best cities in the world. I don't know what you're thinking here. Like, are you reasoning this through? And you're like, no. I have a sort of vibe that I'm following. I'm like, all right. And then obviously with the pandemic and all this stuff, I'm just like astounded, because you would set yourself up so well. But the thing more than anything that really hit me was you were saying, right, I've got to retract from all this stuff now, and I've got to start doing some work. And I'm like, what type of work? I was expecting like, I don't know, Buddhist meditation, do the big long program or something like that and fix yourself. But you're like, no, I want to go home and I I want to meet, I want to talk to my family and all that. And I remember, like, you know, emotionally for me, I'm like what the fuck, like what good's your family, that type of thing, you know? Because I've the same thing. Like, I love my family and they're great and they're all Chads. All of them are Chads, but you know, they're in the West during a time of spiritual nihilism, and there's some bad things about it. You know, they're not in a great place, some parts of it, and it's, you know, very demoralized people, that type of thing. And you kind of, it's sort of like you want to dismiss them because they're no help, you know. They're not bringing out positivity because they're spiritually broke and all this. And I'm sort of like, why should I fix them? Like, I need to go and become strong and be free from them, being independent from them, you know. That was kind of the way I'd be thinking about it. I need to break free from them, be independent, so that I can, you know, I can maybe even have control and lead them or something like that. But you're like, no, I'm going to go in and I'm going to spread the juice. I'm going to spread the good energy and all that. And now, after all that, considering that, like, you know, we're all like, now is a time we need strong families. And you're kind of coming back to me and saying, you never told me any of this, you know, you just said, this is what I'm doing. And now I'm like, holy fuck, investing in having a strong family, moralizing your family now is incredibly valuable, unbelievably valuable. I see how important that probably will become over the next couple of years. Yeah. And what led you to that was trust, humility, and most importantly, love for the captain of the team. So sorry, dude.
No, dude, that's wonderful. I mean, we can unpack this because just as a little bit of background and me killing it in London. So I don't want to say that, you know, money is bad or evil at all. I think it's actually the opposite. And I personally actually like money. I think when even Jesus talks about, you know, the rich and the poor, I get where he's coming from. And I think a lot of times he actually talks about spiritual richness and spiritual hunger, you know. But I also know that money can be very tempting. And with money, like, my relationship with it was just that I realized, and it was such a cliche, it felt weird even before Christ, that I realized that it really doesn't give you happiness, you know. I mean, I come from a poor background here in Hungary. I was, like, you know, growing up in the middle of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and there was a whole economic reboot, but in the beginning especially, those are standards of poverty that are unseen currently in the Western world. And by the way, we were fine. Like, I remember a happy childhood, you know? Yeah. And when I had all this money, which was like way more than I imagined, and, you know, don't think millions, but I couldn't really spend it, you know, anymore, because I didn't also have time to spend it because I was working all the time. But I could buy all the shit that I wanted. I could invest it in, you know, women, and all kinds of stuff that at the end of the day, over time, I just felt like it's not really giving me any satisfaction. You know, it's like I'm a colander. I'm trying to fill this up, but I'm bleeding from all these holes. You know, I'm not whole. I'm not holy. You know. Yeah. And this is something that you cannot really talk to your friends about, you know, because you're making you're making that money, and it feels like, oh, what is he even talking about? But I felt that was a problem, but I just kept putting the plasters on top, you know. Maybe I just need more stuff. Maybe I just, you know, need more casual sex. Maybe just more, you know. I'm not living enough in this great opportunity that I have in London. And then what happens with Jesus, actually, that he will, or at least happened to me. He reorganizes your priorities, which is weird because it's a massive change. It's a transformation.
That's, you know?
A
great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And your priorities and also your intentions and what it does. And this is something that I think very important to understand, that whatever this experience is, and it's being described in religious texts as the Holy Spirit will illuminate the darkness, whatever. Well, you can think about it as a metaphor, and that's what it happens, because it won't do anything for you. All it will do is it will reveal things to you, so you see things clearly, so you have a choice now, you know. That's it. And then when you see things clearly, there are things that you cannot unsee. And because of that, for example, with regards to priorities, the whole family stuff, suddenly I saw it like it was, which was a festering wound that I neglected. Because in reality, that's what it was. But in my head, it was like, no, I'm like working here in London, you know, making money. I can't let myself to be pulled down by all this emotional baggage.
Yeah, fuck, that's a great way to put it. Yeah,
You see?
that's
But
exact same
then,
thoughts.
yeah, but then when light is, again, it won't push you to do it. No one is holding a gun to your head. That's the point.
You just
You know?
see, yeah.
You just see it's a festering wound, and you are free to neglect it. But now you're neglecting a festering wound, and you can't lie to yourself about the true nature of it anymore. You see? So this is like a very mysterious way in which this happens, but that's what happens.
And that's such a perfect internal description of what I was seeing from the outside. And you never explained it to me like that. Like I don't even think you consciously knew what you were doing in the way you just described it. But that's exactly what it looked like. Suddenly your priorities got all jumbled up. And to me, I was like, what's going on here? Like, what? Like your priorities are all messed up, dude. And you're like, no, this is important. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And now I'm sort of like, oh fuck, I think he was onto something, most certainly. Yeah. So if you could talk about that a bit more, like if you want to get into the details about you know, the atheist dad maybe or something like that, or but it's really up to you.
No, most certainly. So it's interesting. It ties also into, and this is just coming together for me, that the Boyo contribution on top of, for example, Peterson, wasn't just the bold exploration of these taboo ideas, but also the way it's presented. And look, the conclusion that we also arrived at with regards to beauty and vitality, that was really, really important, because that brought the stories to life. That's my conversion was about a story brought to life, you know. It wasn't intellectual. And then that also made me see that this is not it's not a trivial thing, you know, that you're full of life and something, your spirit is shining, you know. That's not trivial. That will affect everything in this material world. It will draw people in. It's incredibly attractive, you know. And I also saw that, my father, he wants this, but he doesn't have it. And why doesn't he have it? And, you know, it's like what's missing from his life that keeps him from, you know, shining like Christ, because what that gives you is really confidence and joy. That's also very important. It's a joyful experience, regardless of your material circumstances. That's the point. You will be dancing while the lions are eating you, you know. and with my father, my relationship really, and I think I can talk about, I mean, they don't speak English, and I don't think, I mean, I'm just joking. I mean, they don't speak English, but I mean, I'm not going to give away such intimate details. I think it will be just something that people might get some value from, at least I hope. And hopefully they can relate as well, because I think one of the reasons why so many young men were drawn to Jordan Peterson was that he was a father figure. He was this father substitute. And I think his willingness and wisdom to engage with these ideas that our fathers just left behind, because that's what happened. You know, they said that we don't need all this wisdom, you know, we're just going to follow whatever is put in front of us. And they left it behind, and this left this massive spiritual hole. And I think this is where most of their psychological anguish comes from. And these are wounds of the soul. Okay. So that's the same thing. That's the same thing. Even I think psychology in Hungarian, it's called lélekgyógyászat, which means like healing of the soul. Is the same thing. And they are wounded, and because of this, they are engaging in behaviors, and they relate to their loved ones even in ways that are not wise. So this is why my relationship with my father over the years developed in a very like antagonistic and a lot of times aggressive way, you know. And that's why it was a really high tension situation at home always, since I don't know, I turned like 13, when I also started to be aggressive and becoming a man. And when I left, when I went to the army around like 18, 19, it kind of settled down, because we just weren't in the same place anymore. But all those old patterns, they persisted, and that made our communication impossible. Actually, you know what? My corporate experience with regards to communication was actually super valuable, because in a company, it's for you boyos who never worked in a big company or even a small one. It's all about internal alignment. It's all about communication. That's it. You're trying to make a relationship work, which is about fluent, smooth communication, really getting over ego issues, humility, responsibility. That's actually what makes things and projects work. Now, I now could put it in contrast with my family, because if I looked at my family as a project, having like a flourishing, thriving family as a project, well, why wasn't it happening? Well, horrible communication. No one could talk to each other because we have all this emotional baggage. And you see, the thing was that when I noticed this first, like years ago, I was like, fuck yeah, like I got it, That's what's missing. Now, all we need is just good communication, That's it. That's it. And when I tried to do it, I was just like, boom, like coming up against the wall again, and again. And you see, it took me years to actually see even myself. I was the problem. I mean, everyone was the problem, but also I was the problem, because what we had was this vicious cycle, it just kept dragging us down, Pain is not being addressed. Real issues are not being addressed. Everyone is turning away from darkness and pain, and then we'll start to put like plasters on it. Everyone will choose their, particular vice, whether it be some sort of addiction to a substance, or, with me, I'm fleeing to London and I'm just, on Tinder all the time and working all the time. That was also like a coping mechanism, because I didn't want to deal with the problem. No one wanted to deal with the problem. So that was the cycle. So good communication, yes, but then there were deeper issues. And you see, I don't want to go into the details about, for example, what I wanted to, I wanted to change my father's diet because he has diabetes.
Well,
and yeah, go for it.
Maybe I could put a point into this, because like I go through very, very similar things with my family and whatnot. Is like I left when I was very, very young, and I always detected in them that they didn't understand. It really hurt them. Like they were like, "Why did you go away?" And they never understood that, and they always kind of looked at me like, they were trying to reach out in a way. They were trying, no, maybe not, that's not even right. Their emotions wanted to connect, but they felt they didn't know what to do. And they were sort of like, in some sense, disappointed, angry, upset. They felt bad themselves. They're like, what, did we do something wrong and all that stuff? And it was all tied up with, me having to run away as well, because a lot of the habits that had built up in my family were like, like as you're saying, a lot of sugar in the diets, like something very, very simple like that. And I have autoimmune diseases from it. I got eczema and all that. And like the second I left the house, it all went away and stuff like this. And even just general, like things like that really start to wear on it. And then, the television's always on in the corner. And believe me, I have some gripes with the old TV. And then obviously what's coming through the television, a lot of stuff can be quite, it's kind of, the culture's in a weird place right now. It's very demoralizing towards people. It puts, especially Western people, down a lot, that type of thing. And so it's not like, it's not good to not believe in yourself, it's not that type of thing. Like I noticed this a lot, like a lot of people who are in this matrix, if they don't believe in themselves. They think that they're it's very, very passive or something like that, or they don't believe they're good or something like that. They don't believe they have any noble spirits. Whereas I look at my family and very hard workers. Some of them are like genius intelligent. There's some artists in my family that are just razor sharp and all that. But there's this kind of collective not liking themselves. And then on top of that, this is the most profound one of all. They hate God. They hate the church. They hate they laugh at it, Like exactly. We'd sit down there, and there's some TV shows, like one of them is Father Ted in Ireland, which is funny, but it parodies the church, and it almost like subtly like makes ridicule of the Lord, if you will. And like obviously I'm no paragon of Christianity. Like I'm split on the Lord myself, like who is the Lord and all this stuff. But still at the same time, I can see that, and I can see how pernicious that is, because there's no belief in the purpose of the world. There's no belief in the purpose of yourself. And you should just have like the only thing that's going to fill your the lost hole that leaves is buying more material things, because everybody's middle class now and eating hedonistic diets. Like, why are you eating that bad food? It's like, well, we all die one day, so you may as well just enjoy it while you're here. And And then how do we repair problems? Oh, well, we buy stuff and all this stuff like that. And that just creates this terrible storm, because the one thing that's missing there is there's this horrible alienation where no one has the emotional skills to bridge these divides. So I would come back and I'm obviously still salty about having to leave because of all these problems, because I didn't feel good about myself. And I blamed them. And it was always my fault. It was always my responsibility. Maybe their fault, maybe the world's fault, maybe God's fault. But
it's your fault. It's everyone's fault. It's like mea culpa. It's like mea culpa. That means that through my fault, through my most grievous fault. That's a pattern repeated for a reason. This is, and also, by the way, this can be a very secular idea. Jocko Willink. The Navy SEAL. His whole thing is extreme ownership. It's always your fault.
Yes.
Look, we use that in our company as okay. So in our company, I did bring in, after a while, some sort of a moral compass, but it wasn't led by Christ. It was from Jocko Willink and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, good business, all that stuff, and it actually works. So it actually works because when everyone is taking responsibility for every issue, okay, this is how I could have prevented it. You can always find a way, by the way. So it's actually real, and it also works. And I think this whole idea of I'm going to humble myself and I'm going to look at honestly what I did wrong, because I guarantee you did a lot of things wrong, or at least you could have done it better, all the time. And it's fine. It also gives you that reassurance that it's fine. You're a human being. Every person in the church since Christ is a sinner. Also, sin has this very bad branding, all this baggage to it. But what is it? It's missing the mark. The mark is perfection. That was like the perfect course of action, and you missed it. Like that's
Not
it.
Surprised.
And it's your fault, and it's fine. Now I don't want to digress, but. And such a good point that you made, that all these people with immense potential. I mean, honestly, dude, my dad is probably the most intelligent person I've met. And I'm trying to not magnify it, but he's like viciously smart, like scary smart, and he has all this potential that he just couldn't develop. Look, I mean, he built a family, he built a house, he built a business, and, he grew up without a father. And there was like a lot of tragedy in the family and all that. So well fucking done, but at the same time, he is wounded in the soul and his heart is bleeding. And after a while, especially since we left and he didn't have that team to pull him together, because before it was like, this is my squad, I'm leading this team. I need to get up in the morning to put food on the table for this family. When that was gone, when we left, both me and my sister, then nothing, like the whole thing just collapsed, because it was a house of cards, because he didn't have something meaningful in the depth. And very, very quickly, he descended into nihilism. The kind of nihilism that whenever I was around, and I know that my mom had to listen to this all the time, was this incessant rambling about how meaningless and dark the world actually is. How everyone is a piece of shit and there's no point to it. And he read The Selfish Gene and then was going on about that. And look, I read The Selfish Gene back in the days and I enjoyed it. I think a lot of it is actually true. I mean, a little bit outdated, but still, like, there's not much to debate there about, how biology works. But he was just like sticking to those very fundamental principles of everything is just it happens on the material realm. There is no God. He was literally like raging against God. And all this darkness, well, it's just like, it's opposite as when you have some sort of inexplicable light emanating from a person, like an energy, like a vibe, like a warmth. The darkness will do the opposite. It will pull people down. It's like a black hole. It's suffocating. It's like vacuum, and everyone can feel it. And he's getting the worst of it, by the way, but everyone else. And look, this is what I'm describing is just an objective experience of what went down in my family and the people. But you see, without my eyes being opened, I wasn't acknowledging that it's actually like one of the key problems that we need to solve. Because when you are also in that state, it causes a lot of conflict, a lot of friction. And, when you have something, like you find something in the world as the good boy, as a good son, and brings it back to the village that, hey, I found this. Like, for example, here's a remedy for your diabetes. they will reject it. They won't hear it. But this is what you think, like, hey, I'm bringing all this shit back. Like, there you go, like, take it, and then, rejoice. And people will not accept your offerings because of all the emotional baggage. And look, I've been in sales for a long time. I thought I knew how human psychology works. And I was just like, I can't solve this. Something is here that I cannot solve with the tricks and the shenanigans and the techniques.
Oh, great point. Yeah, great point.
It's just not working. And I had the tools, I really had the tools. I was on the phone 10 hours a day with the highest level business executives. I understood, I saw the matrix, at least I thought I did, and with my family, I was just, it wasn't working, and also pulled back constantly into that cycle because it's irresistible. It's irresistible. Now, this is where, Jesus entered the scene. Because what happened with him is that the whole idea of Jesus, it's about breaking the cycle. It's about breaking cycles that are hidden from us. You know why I'm so attracted to the Girardian interpretation as well of who Jesus was? Because that's about, look, we are stuck in a cycle for literally thousands of years, and it's a cycle that we can't see. And it's just perpetuating, and there's like a lot of blood and pain caused by that. And then it's revealed, and you need to overcome that by imitating Jesus, essentially. And that's what was new in the system, because in that isolated system, which was my family, with our past and present, that was an isolated system, me and my perspective, and my dad with his perspective, and all the emotional baggage and our past interactions. That's an isolated system. And as in physics, in an isolated system, entropy can only grow. Yeah. That's what physics says. And then I needed something new from the outside. I gave this example, that before we were on the ground, and I tried to pull ourselves up, and it won't work.
Yeah, that's a great,
else. Yeah. And the image is when Jesus reaches out, and again, about really seeing these stories come to life because of the Boyo community. This just happened. It was a way of working through ideas of, hey, we're gonna represent it. We show these in some way. Even your interactions with Jimmy and your conversations, that's what it did through storytelling. It just put your mind into that state when you are thinking like that, and you actually see Jesus reaching out. It's not like it's a vision. It's not like you're hallucinating, but it comes to life as an image, and it will make sense, because ultimately it does make sense. Because when I started to imitate Jesus, despite of what I actually wanted to do, because to give you an example, and this is kind of an anecdote, and like a really personal, but that was a massive revelation to me. Is I tried to get my father to change his diet, for example, or to get out of this nihilistic thinking, which was just inevitably misguided. It wasn't working. Everyone hated it, including him. It wasn't helping our collective effort in any way. No one could make an argument for it. All the arguments could be made against it. That if you're always negative and dark, well, how can you expect anything positive to happen?
It's actually amazing how it works, because I think everybody knows that. It's like this is a horrible way to think, but the thing that's going on inside your head is that this is true, though. That's so interesting, isn't it? That you're saying to yourself, the reason why I'm going to rant about this is because this is the truth, and then that makes a very interesting challenge. It's like, are you sure it's the truth? Because there might be another truth. Yeah, but go on, dude. Anyway.
No, exactly. And you see, this is just also, again, making the point that arguments themselves, well, sometimes they don't even matter, because I can argue all day about why your negative, nihilism is shit. Well, but it's not about the logical arguments. The problem is something else. And it was really getting rough and getting really bad. And this is also about, I think, you need to really hit rock bottom, like in Fight Club, you need to really hit rock bottom to be able to resurrect. And I was at home at my parents' place, and you could feel the tension from the first day. Like, I arrived, and I could feel that, all this darkness is like bubbling up from the surface. And it's not like it has an intent or it has a goal. It's just really pure darkness. And my approach to it was always not to get sucked into it, try to hold my frame, but it will inevitably snap, because it will be me trying to like reject what's actually going on, and it will escalate. And how it usually ended is just like when I was 14, me and my father shouting at each other, like being close to physical conflict, which happened like multiple times, and it's just about like being aggressive, being defensive, hitting back, really protecting your ego, like puffing yourself up. Then the other puffs himself up, and it just escalates into shouting, things are breaking, and it's kind of cathartic, by the way. So actually, when that happens, it's cathartic, so we can finally settle down, but nothing is actually resolved, This is, again, if you see, this is very Girardian in the sense that this is like a cathartic scapegoating thing.
Yeah, true, yeah.
And what is needed? Well, I can't fucking solve it because I'm a human being and I'm my father's son and I have 20-something years of all this baggage built up. I can't break out of this. And it started to happen. Like you can feel the switch, My dad just jumps up at a random moment. We're in silence for minutes. I'm in the kitchen. My dad is like working in the living room, like silence. You can hear the keyboard, me like brewing my tea. And then suddenly my dad just jumps up and starts to shout. Like, and I can't even remember specifically what he was shouting about because it didn't matter, It was all emotional.
Yeah.
And I could feel like I was looking at him. And when this happens, you can feel the pull back into your old habits, your old stance, your reflex is to, okay, he's doing that. Now I need to do that. And then we're just going to continue as usual. And I could feel that. I could feel like really the blood like rushing into my heart and my head. I could really feel the adrenaline started to pump and I was ready to jump. I could feel like, okay, I'm like, it's even like kind of a rush in your head, kind of like high.
Yeah.
And you want to get into it. And then something just stopped me. Okay. And I'm just describing now what happened to me. I'm not saying what actually happened. No metaphysics. Calm the fuck down, everyone. Like from an experiential point of view, this is what happened. And what I did is I looked at this man. By the way, he's a big guy, He's like as tall as me, so like 6'2", and he's like way heavier than me. Probably, I'd say like at least 250 pounds. And this is big guy, super loud. I think I'm loud. He's like way louder. So a formidable presence. And he's standing there and shouting. And what I did was exactly the opposite of what I would have done otherwise. So instead of stepping back and starting shouting, I started to just walk towards him. And I was looking him in the eye. And I honestly didn't know why I did that. And I had no point of reference, no experience. I didn't read this anywhere, It was just it was like a sequence that happened through me. And I started to walk towards him, like looking him deep in the eye. And I was just telling him that dad. And he just kept shouting, just kept shouting and looking at me. I was like, Dad. And I started walk towards him, and he started to like back off. He started to like walk backwards. Again, I don't know why it happened as it happened. I'm just describing the scenario. So he started to back, and then I would just keep telling him, Dad. And I backed him into the corner behind the desk because he didn't know what to do. He just kept talking. And when I came up against him, I just hugged him and I kissed him on the face. And I told him like this, like, Dad, I love you, right? I love you. And this was the first time ever in my life, that I told my dad that I loved him. He never told me ever in his life, and I never told him. It just wasn't the kind of relationship,
Yeah.
It was a kind of relationship maybe with my mom, growing up, but not with my dad. It was like the first time in 28 years by the time that it happened. And he just froze. He was like standing there.
You cast a magic spell. What the fuck?
No. It was crazy. I'm getting chills now talking about it because I was like, what the fuck is going on? And it was like, okay then. So that was it. And I walked outside, sat down and started my meal, you know, and then a minute later he came out like, hey, you're available? And he sat down and we had this massive, deep conversation, you know, with just free flowing. You could feel like the emotional release and the relief, you know, in that talk. It was like settling things. It was reconciling things, you know.
That's amazing, man.
Between
Holy
the two of
fuck.
us. And look, again, I don't even remember what we were talking about because that wasn't the point.
Do you know what I think?
Do
you know, this will probably we're probably not gonna have time to talk about Saint Laszlo, but you know what I think about when you're talking about that is bravery. That's what's so fucking interesting, is that it would take balls to do that. Like, I'd be scared of doing that because it feels so vulnerable. You know what I mean?
I cringe thinking about it.
That's fucking nuts, dude. Because I know exactly, like, I think we all know that when you do stuff like that, it does open up the possibility to be real. That's such an amazing take. Sorry, dude, for interrupting the flow. Keep going.
No, not at all. Because that's a really good point. Like courage. Because you know what happened when it happened during. I couldn't really even process it. I wasn't like, okay, this was the Holy Spirit, but no, it was like, ooh, fuck, what did just happen? And then for months, you don't really integrate the experience. You figure it out later. And courage is a really good point because you know what happened? My dad, I think he respected me while I was doing that. It was because he knew that it was something that he couldn't do.
Fuck,
it was something that
such a good take
that he couldn't do. You know, for whatever reason. I mean, it was like pure positivity, you know, what us like hugging and telling him that, by the way, I love you, you know, and why don't we sit down and have a talk like face to face, like man to man between father and son. That's like a good thing. He can't do it.
It's so like to go back to Saint Laszlo. It's so masculine when you think about it because it's almost like in such a like Chad like love way, you know, like the Jesus Chad mode. Because you imagine like dudes, they like to imagine themselves dealing with women where it's like the woman is like emotional and freaking out all the time. And then they're like the calm, rational one who just kind of like relaxes her, you know, with the touch on the shoulder and being like, look, I got you, don't worry, and all that. And it's so funny that when you're caught up in that aggression, you're thinking of yourself as like the badass, you know, I'm cutting down Laszlo because he's a fool. Exactly. But then actually what's going on is you're the emotional flaying person who's not in control and is actually scared. Generally, like I think about when I get angry, I'm frustrated. I'm actually kind of sad when I'm angry. Well, like deep down, there's like this tinge of like things are not going my way, and I'm trying my best. Like I think about my relationship with my family and whatnot, and that's an interesting one. Is that you know, like I try bring stuff up, like, you know, let's try put our heads together and try and make all this stuff work. And there's always sarcastic comments because we're Irish, and I remember it's so interesting is that one time, like what would happen is a sarcastic comment would come and I'd try to outwit the sarcastic comment. That's what the Irish people do. It's like it becomes a witty match. That's why we get so sharp. It's kind of a good thing in a way, but it's got a serious downsides. I remember one time I just completely just fronted it with like absolute authentic, like, you know, honesty, being like, why are we being sarcastic about this? Let's not just try escape. I just literally just observed what was happening. Let's not try escape through sarcasm, and let's be sincere. We're trying to do a good thing together here. Let's not try run away from the tension. Let's actually face the tension and get this better because we care about each other. And it was just like, it was literally like, it turned the sarcasm, which was such this powerful, like framing thing where it's like, I'm better than you. I'm almost like masculine because I've outwitted you, to a completely effeminate, weak thing to do, a cowardly thing to do. It was avoiding reality, that type of thing. Exactly. There's such an interesting take in it, dude. And that's great, man. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. And you see, this is something that we also hit on in the Boyosphere, that this authentic engagement with reality, to see things as they are. It's like literally the most powerful thing you can do. And personally, I just think that in this realm of emotions, I didn't know what to do. You see, I think that was like the key for me, that first of all, I had to admit that all this shit that I amassed over the years, all these skills, you know, all my experience, all these sales techniques about, you know, power framing and social dynamics, whatever. Well, it didn't get me far with with this festering wound, which is a festering wound for me and my family. and I could do anything, I could have all the money in the world that won't touch this wound, which is real, and I had to admit that, and I had to like humble myself in front of an authority that I put my faith in that he does know. You see, and it was a leap of faith, and it was also in a way desperate, because I had to admit that, look, I can't solve this, and if you can't solve it, it will remain unsolved, but I'm putting my faith into you. And you know why I put my faith into him, and this is very crucial, again, like a conversion insight, that I didn't put my faith into him because the logical consistency of the scriptures or even the psychological no, it was because when I looked up, I could, see him coming on the white horse with the of angels, which I really liked, and it really electrified me in a way. And that's why I was like, okay, I'm willing to put my faith into it because it's just so beautiful. This ties into the idea, and I know that time is probably running out, but even with the passion of the Christ, the whole story of the crucifixion, how I look at it is a love letter from God to humanity. Again, this is actually the insight that you had in that video that I mentioned. I just didn't finish the thought that, look, I love you so much that I'm going to do this for you. And this was also a moment when we could understand God, because, humanity tries to figure out God since the dawn of humanity. It's like, what is God?
It's so interesting to think of it that way, dude, because it's like what we're talking about with the parents thing, is that he's like the dad and we're like the son, and we're fighting each other. And he turns around and he's the one who walks up to you and allows you to kill him. And he still says, I love you. And that's fucking nuts, man. What
exactly.
Oh man, that's brilliant. Holy shit.
Dude, and that's why even when you think about the crucifixion, this is like, I know you're trying to figure me out. You can, but let me show you my heart. That's what the crucifixion is, showing you my heart, literally like opening up to you in the flesh. My skin is being flayed, the spear is in my back, like you can see everything. I'm being the most vulnerable anyone ever was, despite being this all-powerful being. And in that sense, you have this, if you see it that way, it will touch you like deep down, you will have this emotional moment that will enable you to start imitating Christ. Because before, I won't imitate him, that hippie, that meek guy, I don't want to imitate him. But this will have like a frame shift. And
it's amazing. It's amazing just the attitude towards Jesus is that there's almost like, it's so strange. People either like love him or hate him. Like, it is very, very bipolar. And I don't mean hate. I mean, they make fun of him. You know what I mean? Like
disdain and mockery.
Mockery is the one. It's this strange humility. It's like, what a loser or something like that. And even in Nietzsche, Nietzsche calls him noble. Nietzsche never crosses that line, but I see it a lot nowadays. Like, and I'm talking about like even among people in my circles and all that. Like, I mean, my family and stuff like that. Like, that's the sort of culture, and it's so interesting is that it's okay to humiliate a perfectly like beautiful being. You know what I mean? Like, it's like that's a thing, and that's actually shocking when you think about it. Considering what we're talking about.
How polarizing. This is something that I've been thinking about. That how can he be so polarizing after 2,000 years? Every person who meant anything has an opinion about Jesus. Either dismissing him or condemning him, loving him. But you need to be somewhere there, or at least you need to be like in mockery and just really like dismissal. Actually, with my family, that's the case. Something very interesting. If I look at my father, he's like a very well-read person. So it's not just that he's incredibly intelligent. While I was growing up, he was literally reading 3 books a week. He was a freak, and everything like really open. He explored Buddhism and Eastern thought and everything. He never touched Jesus. Never touched Jesus. Never even went close. It's alien to him. Living in a country like Hungary, by the way, might I add, in a quite a Christian city too. But it's like, we're not going there. I'm not touching that thing. Well, of course, as Carl Jung said, the thing that you need the most can be found in the place that you least want to look. You see, and with me, I mean, what could I have done? This is like a great example of what true Christianity is. What I'm gonna go at him and start to preach at him about right and wrong, about to tackle his nihilism.
That's a great point. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I find that the thing that I talk to many ex-Christians or atheists or whatever the fuck you want to call them, like moderns, and that's the one thing that turned them off it was the preaching thing. But it's so annoying because you're sort of like, look, if I understand anything, that's not what it is. Like what you're describing to me, fuck, I don't know if there's few people who would sit through this conversation and not at least kind of like think a little bit or feel a little bit. That's the really big thing. So.
Yeah, and it's about it is about embodying the ideas. I mean, with me, with this whole Christian thing, I'm relatively new to it, and I do think I have even like a benefit of this perspective of not having been brought up in that thought, and I can just look outside and see what the problem is, because Christians are not. It's not like I do, like I'm very far from being sinless, and I will be till my last breath, because that's what it is. But this whole thing, Christianity, why it needs revitalization, if there is such a word, why it needs life in it again, because there is no life in it. It's just the lifeless concepts, devoid of the action, devoid of the soul even, because your soul will move you in a way that will allow you to be a little bit more like Christ. It's this whole idea of be like Jesus. I can preach at my dad, it won't do anything. If I manage to just embody like a fragment of what Jesus was, it will just shine through me with such a power that it will bring him to his knees, in a positive sense. It will allow him to humble himself. And that's what happened, by the way, because after this conversation, miraculously, he started to ask questions about the diet, It's like, oh, like, by the way, about the diet thing, Of course, completely unrelated, for sure. But no, something switched. He was starting to listen. He asked me for movie recommendations. Like a random thing. Do you have a good movie that you would like to recommend? Even though, like, before I was recommending all kinds of shit, he never watched them, out of, whatever, out of spite. Probably the same reason why I haven't watched his recommendations. It's like, you see, so something changes, and it's something that you cannot, okay, and this is the thing, you see, I couldn't have thought about this plan, It was like beyond my reach. I can't come up with this plan of, how I will solve my dad's like diet issues and the emotional wounds of the family. I can't come up with that plan because I lack the wisdom. So I need that help from the outside.
Bro, that was brilliant. I'm really glad that we fucking took this frame on that talk, because we tried to do this before where it was a lot of like us talking about like philosophy and all this, but this was raw. I really enjoyed this, dude. I'm afraid I do have to go. I'm like 15 minutes, like I think someone else is waiting on me, so I'm gonna have to sort all that stuff out. But that was top drawer, dude. And look, all the boyos listening, I'm usually supposed to slip in a pitch of some sort here, but we've nothing planned, so I don't know. Maybe pick up a Bible and give it a look. There's maybe your first step.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, people. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Laszlo. Thank you very much for your time as well.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No problem, man. No problem.